make this statement and how ignorant I was to really not, it was in jest, but I used to say if I could afford it, I'd be an alcoholic. Now I was making funnies at the time, but little did I know how much that was really true.
I would be tense, and if I took a drink, then I could relax and maybe excuse that as, oh, possibly a reward for having been a good girl.
I would drink at hours when any normal person wouldn't be drinking, and I wouldn't want to be seen out in that condition. I just felt like, well, we live in a respectable community. My husband has a very good job, and I didn't want to be advertising my drunkenness.
Remember, the fear of not having a drink is more dominant than any fear I'd ever have. If someone said to me, you're going to lose your children, your house, your husband, so what? If I can have a drink, I don't care.
My husband just said point blank, it's either me or alcohol, and you have got to do something about it. And of course, he had told me many, many times before this that I was an alcoholic, and I was having some feelings myself about this, but I wasn't about to admit it to him.
He says, Mother, I never knew you were a drunk. I never knew you were an alcoholic. You were never staggering and saying silly things. He said, when you had that glass there, I just thought it was like Coca-Cola.
Degraded, humiliated, ashamed, self-pity. My family was all ashamed of me.
The society views a woman alcoholic as along the same lines as a clergyman once told me. You know, he said, I really can identify with women alcoholic because society thinks a man of the cloth, he shouldn't, you know, have this problem. He should be stronger. Society puts them up kind of, you know, we're the mothers, we're the backbone, we're kind of the strength. And so when we fall, of course, we fall where angels shouldn't fall.
It's just like a woman smoking. It used to be if the general public saw a woman smoking out in public, they were ridiculed, degraded, so on and so forth. Now it's an accepted fact, more or less. Alcohol is the same way. People see a woman that is drunk, they put them on the lowest level possible. I would say in the beginning, when I was drinking heavily, and I drank mostly vodka, some beer, but mostly vodka, I would say about a half of a fifth in the beginning. And that was over a period of several hours because I'm not a fast drinker. And then it increased to, well, when I started getting the shakes, notice that I was drinking about a fifth of vodka a day, which I knew that was too much, but I required that in order to stop shaking and to just act normal, or try to act normal. I worked in a bar as a bartender and for a few months while this with my daughter and myself was going on and all these problems, personal problems I was having. And it did lend to it for the fact that instead of going straight home when I got off of work, I usually stayed at the bar where I was tending bar at, or go dancing, one of the two, and instead of going straight home and consume this liquor. And I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of it at all now. Maybe my relatives, some of them are now yet. I don't know. If it is, then that's their problem. Because if it's not one thing, it's going to be another with them. With anybody. They're going to have a problem of some sort. Some of our most intelligent people and prominent people in the world are alcoholics.
Getting my BA, that is the only thing of which I'm proud. Those years I'm so ashamed of because I had so many opportunities that I didn't take an advantage of. But I could have met so many others and done so much more with my life in foreign service if I hadn't been an alcoholic. I, to begin with, drank stronger stuff. I wouldn't dream of drinking before going to work in the morning, and would only drink at lunchtime if I were offered a drink by a superior. In other words, I was conscientious on the job. And but the minute that I got out of the office and went home, I didn't wait for friends to be sitting around in my living room before taking a drink, particularly if I had had a hard day or were homesick or angry or, you know. I would drink by myself, and another thing too, it didn't take me any length of time in a city like Nairobi, far away from home, to ferret out the women alcoholics to drink with. I was dependent upon alcohol in a different way once I was married. Like the immature person that I was before I got married, when I was engaged, I thought to myself, well, Joan, you've been drinking too much for your own good, and it's all because you've been with a hard-drinking crowd. But once you get back to America, things will be altogether different, because you'll feel more at home, and there'll be so many of your old friends that you haven't seen in years, and you'll start having children, and just being married will change the whole pattern. And it didn't turn out that way at all, because by that time I had not only the mental compulsion to drink, but the physical craving. And I found that if I tried to get along for a day or two without it, I would go into convulsions. And I couldn't carry on my daily work. Supposing, for example, a housewife, especially if she's married to a man in a prominent position, is forced to belong to certain societies and perhaps be chairman of the group or vice president of the woman's club or whatever, and is an alcoholic, and perhaps has to make speeches, at least presenting guest speakers to the audience, doing that sort of thing, entertaining frequently, and going places with her husband. And she is by nature terribly shy and self-conscious, and alcohol has been her crutch. Supposing she's invited to a tea where no alcoholic beverages are served. The tea is in the afternoon, say at around 2 or 3. She can't arrive with alcohol on her breath. So she usually doesn't sleep the night before, and she just has to steel herself, unless she doesn't care about disgracing her husband. But if she wants to go to that party sober and not make a fool of herself, the willpower that it takes not to drink before appearing at that tea, and she probably, by the way, will not even lift the cup to her lips because of her shaky hands, the willpower that it takes is tremendous. I always hid it in the bedroom closet or in the storeroom because of people coming in, neighbors and relatives. But I didn't have to from my husband, and he wanted to shield me from public disgrace. And he never wanted it to be said that his wife went to the government liquor store here in Burlington. And instead, every weekend, he would go to other towns, 7 or 8 of them, and then he would alternate, sometimes driving for hours. I don't know exactly how long. The trips would take, return trips, sometimes 5 hours, just for my supply to last me through the week. Because he never wanted me to go into the government liquor store, and he knew I would never go into a bar. Well, if you're a career woman and you have been drinking yourself to sleep the night before, starting in, say, at 7 o'clock, and then getting up the next morning, oh, the feeling. If the average person had to try to get out of bed and get dressed and try to eat breakfast, try to get themselves into shape to get to the office and then get through the day without a drink, you have no idea the willpower it takes. You just have to keep saying, fight it, fight it, fight it. You can't give in. You can't give in. You'll lose your job. You'll lose your job.
Drinking or sleeping, and of course that's when my job simply fell apart at the seams. I just wasn't able to function. And yeah, I was encountering music that I didn't know well enough to even fake my way through. There was just too much coordination involved and too much quick thinking. There would be very vast key changes, or there would be sections where every note had an accidental over it. And when you see a double sharp followed by a double flat, then your wheels start to have to move very quickly. or very tricky rhythms I couldn't think through. A cello is a disaster for a drunk person because you have great distances to cover and accuracy in hitting the notes, and a sloppy cello player is simply intolerable. He is a real disaster, and that's what I became. It began in Tulsa, but it became a very sharp thing. So this snowballed. By the time I left Tulsa, I was drinking quite regularly on the job. And I tried to quit that when I went to Mobile because it was a full-time job. And that progressed because I was unhappy with the professional situation. So I resorted to alcohol just simply to get through the rehearsal. And I was trying to play under more and more circumstances where I was less and less prepared with the music, so I became all thumbs and unable to think. I would wake up very early in the morning feeling very shaky and very insecure, and I would think, well, will my stomach get me through a 2.5-hour rehearsal? And feeling as I did, any physical effort just stirred up things, and I just was feeling too shaky, so I would start out as early as 7 o'clock in the morning with a drink, and for a while that would be enough to say get me through the morning with maybe a nip at intermission. And then I found that I had to get up earlier and earlier in order to fill this terrible thing in and give me the courage to even arrive there and be able to hold my head up. And yet I realized that I was encountering music that I was unfamiliar with, so I didn't have the coordination to handle it. So I knew I was really in serious trouble a good 10 or 12 years before I sought help. I just had a feeling that I was going to need professional help before I could get it straightened out. And the idea that I could taper off, of course, had entered my mind, and I tried that, but it simply didn't work. Not caring, I feel, is one of the disasters. You don't care not only about your professional integrity, in fact, you really couldn't care less, but it's about household things, too. You don't care whether you eat. It's just the obsession is, where does this next drink come from? And I mustn't allow myself to run out. And as long as that need is satisfied, everything else will unfold for itself. Now, of course, as a single person, I didn't have family responsibilities at that time. And I felt no real obligation to meet for anybody else. I would always have the feeling, well, he can take care of himself without my help. And my whole need was completely self-centered. I could hide behind what the other players were able to do. I could just simply cool it and underplay so that I would say not ruin the music, but at the same time not contribute. And this feeling of not contributing, when you feel that you're equipped to contribute, is just not a healthy atmosphere. You go home just feeling very lousy about yourself. And that's very degrading to a musician. You say, well, I knew better than that, and why didn't I do it? I just didn't have the courage to. So I was simply developing this very bad yellow streak and blue outlook where I just didn't have the courage of my own convictions. And alcohol just simply progressively made that worse.
Would play golf and use that 19th hole as the greatest excuse. I used to think that's the only reason I played golf, is because I couldn't wait till that 19th hole, and I could go in and get bombed early in the afternoon. So any excuse we could use, why, it was great. After Florida, we came back to Iowa, and I think that's when I really started my alcoholic drinking, at about age 28, and I had 2 children by then. And I would always try not to drink in the morning. Of course, I'd stay drunk till 5 in the morning, and then people would say, well, you don't drink in the morning, you couldn't be an alcoholic. And living with an alcoholic who drank in the morning, I figured that this is one way I'll be better than he is. And so I didn't choose to drink in the morning. And went down to Phoenix after a while, figuring that Sioux City wasn't the answer. More geographical cure and more escape. And of course we got to Phoenix and thought we'd died and gone to heaven, because Iowa was a dry state at that time, and they had bars and liquor stores on every street, and any hour you wanted to get a bottle and get drunk, you were fine. And it was much nicer to have a nice clean bar to go into than to have a place like you had to be here. Either you were at the country club and drinking, or you were in some of these lousy bars downtown. And you certainly didn't want to associate with any of those people. So down there everything was fine, and went into a real full-blown alcoholism right then, where I drank, not in the home though, I had such a hard time identifying with the woman alcoholic after I got sober, because most of the women drinkers do drink at home. And I didn't choose to because of the children. I thought if I could get out. And I think also I was seeking company lower than myself, because probably the self-image and the ego was so low that when I could get down to some of these good old bars like the Wild Horse in Phoenix and some of those places, then I would be a queen. I'd walk in and just write a check, and they'd say, well, here she comes. And they would always take care of me, because they'd get to the point where I couldn't drive the car. And so they'd put me in a cab, send me home. And I'd wake up the next morning, I'd have to go out in the garage to see where the heck, if the car was there. I didn't even remember getting home. And I started the blackouts then, so severely. I'd be driving down on Central Avenue in Phoenix, and I would say, stop the car and ask somebody how to get to Scottsdale. And I can remember one time a man said to me, lady, if you're in that bad a shape, you better not be driving. Well, shortly after that, I was picked up for drunk driving, and I would, strangely enough, I wasn't too drunk. And so, but they had followed me from some bar. So I got into that paddy wagon, and I said, you can't take me down to jail. You don't know who I am. And they said, lady, we could care less. Well, I think this helped me more to eventually get sober than anything I know of. It really did. It humiliated me down to the point where I couldn't believe what was happening to Patty Martin. I just couldn't believe it. But I figured the drinking pattern that I had was probably no different than anybody else, and at the time maybe it wasn't, because birds of a feather flock together, so the people I was with probably didn't drink any differently, except they used to comment that I had a hollow leg, and I'm sure I could drink more than the average woman. And I thought it was great. I used to get very nauseated when I first started drinking, as I said on my first drunk. I became nauseated and lost it all. And then I thought, how great, after I could drink and not get sick anymore and not pass out, and I could just keep that euphoria going. But then I reached a point with this very high tolerance, and it came on very suddenly with the blackouts, and where I would have 2 drinks, and I couldn't believe it. I was completely bombed, and I was taking no drugs, so that had nothing to do with it. And I would accuse bartenders and my friends and ex-husband that I was being slipped a Mickey. And it wasn't that at all, that the tolerance had completely gone, and that is when one of the final stages, I guess, of alcoholism. But I didn't recognize it. And I sat out on my patio once out by the pool, and I sat there and I said, I don't know why I get so drunk. And I was crying, naturally, because I think I cried probably half my drunken years there, the last 5 years. And they said, well, why do you drink? And I said, I don't know, but would you fix me one? At that point, I couldn't even walk in to go to the bar to get a drink. So they brought a drink out, and then I would go into my terrible personality change. And this is what I think probably I dreaded more than anything, because the morning afters, I wouldn't suffer from a tummy ache or a headache severely, but I would suffer remorse. It was unbelievable. What did I say? Who did I cut up last night? And being a woman, I was foxy enough to realize I could get by with throwing drinks and throwing furniture and using foul language and cutting people up. I became very paranoid and very much of a persecution complex, imagining. I think I had hallucinations probably more than I realized, And I can remember one Christmas, my very final Christmas before I quit drinking, was one of the most tragic scenes I've ever, well, and I don't want to ever forget it, though, but I don't play on it. And we were all sitting around the Christmas tree, and at this time we were trying to get Mother to get with it so she could have something with her children, and I got up, and I took that Christmas tree, and I threw it clear across the floor. Well, of course, this really is something that you never forget. And I just went, then I tore out the front door and went right to my bars that I had to seek, because I don't know what, I just completely flipped out. So the mental part of the problem is definitely there. I mean, why did the drink have me get out of a chair and tear a Christmas tree down in front of 2 innocent children?
I had some very strong hang-ups due to the fact that I was brought up in such a strict religious home. And my interpretation of God was not a loving God as he's supposed to be, but a punishing God that always had a frown on his face. Because I knew the difference between right and wrong, and when you're drinking and you have absolutely no inhibitions whatsoever when you're drunk, there are things that you're going to do that you know are not right. Drinking, overindulging in drink, for one thing, is wrong to begin with. So consequently, you wind up with hang-ups about religion and these things, because it was something that was preached to me from the time that I was a small child until, I got married. And then I married a boy that was the same faith as I was, and he had been brought up in the same kind of home I had been. So consequently, we were still going to church and so forth. But I had just begun, really, my drinking career by that time. And of course, by the time I was 21 years old, and we got married when I was 19. And by the time I was 21 and able to go into bars and have a good time, this was very enticing to me, I think. It seemed to mark a time in my life. I guess I thought I had grown up, And I lived with my grandmother until I was 19, till I got married. And of course, she was a teetotaler and didn't drink anything, but my step-grandfather drank quite a bit. And of course, my mother drank quite a bit. And like I say, my mother worked in Detroit, and I saw her on weekends and so forth. And I think I probably felt rejected as a child. I love my mother very much, and we do, when we're both sober, we can have a good time together. We used to have a good time occasionally when we drank, but this doesn't last long, because then you get so drunk and then pretty soon you get in an argument. And we used to get in some real good arguments when we were drinking. And my father died about 6, 7 years ago in a mental institution from alcoholism. So I've probably got a pretty good background. After I came back from this treatment center, then I was sober for about a year. And Bill and I had been discussing adopting a child before I quit drinking. And of course, while I was still drinking, it was simply out of the question. And so I had been sober about a year. when we decided to adopt, because by this time I knew that I was on my way to being a decent mother, I guess. I wanted a child very badly. And while I was drinking, I felt very inadequate as far as motherhood was concerned. And so after being sober for a year, I felt that this was the time to start doing some of the things that I'd wanted to do all my life. And I felt that I was ready for this, and that I was going to be able to be a good mother and not wind up getting drunk again. And because coming from a home of alcoholism, I didn't want my daughter exposed to this. Or I didn't want any child to go through this, any child of mine. So we applied for adoption a year after I got my sobriety, and we got her about 6 months after we applied. And this was the most important thing in my whole life, because I had wanted a child for so long, and as I said, felt so inadequate. And when we did get her, I felt like I was starting on a new road again.
I actually can think that for me, teaching in some ways is an escape from the real world, because I didn't have to deal with adults. And as a result, I didn't really relate to adults on a social level either. I just had that classroom, you know, and this was my big security in life, I guess. I was going into my third year of teaching, and the 2 years previous had been very rough, and all summer I was fearing this job. And in August, my brother got married, and when I went to the wedding, I proceeded to get drunk. And I think and I had all these worries on my mind, and I think it was at that point that I thought, here's something that really helps. Here's something that's going to give me this feeling of euphoria, and that I can handle anything and that nothing bothers me. So from that point, I went into the teaching job, and I found out that without alcohol, it was just, to me, it was just facing stark reality that I couldn't handle the kids, that I hated the situation, but I felt trapped, that if I couldn't quit this job or it'd really blow my record. I would like to know the statistics on how many school teachers are alcoholics, because I think it's certainly one profession that is full of frustration and tension from parents, principals. I had a very strict principal. I mean, I almost became paranoid, because she was always watching me, you know, always looking, you know what, they're not. And in the morning when I was sober, I was very rigid. I wanted everything absolutely quiet, no discipline problems. You know, I just wanted absolute perfection from these kids. And if I didn't get it, then I became terribly upset and frightened. I had the noon hour, so I would go to I guess I felt I didn't have enough time to go to the apartment. I would purchase a bottle and then go to, say, McDonald's and get a hamburger and a Coke, and then pour out most of the Coke and then pour the liquor in and sit there and drink it so that people wouldn't see, you know, that I was. Or sometimes, I guess if I was in a hurry, in the school's restroom, I'd drink as much as I felt I needed, and then I'd use mouthwash and keep the bottle. I always used large purses. I remember I bought a purse, you know, that would carry a pint in it. And then the problem got to be going to the same liquor store, and then I found another one a little further away, or if I was real short on time, I'd go go to a supermarket and have to get warm beer and drink that, which I hated. But I'd do anything to get to this release state, this being above fear. I do remember one time standing in front at the blackboard and teaching geography, and all of a sudden I just sort of fell back against the blackboard. So things were kind of out of focus. But when I was under this influence with the children, I just felt very kind toward them, and so that in the afternoon when I had alcohol in me, I don't think I noticed any problem, say, of them misbehaving or talking, because I was just sort of just going along, you know, and everything, you know, we'll do this and we'll do that, and everything just kind of rolled along in a blurry sort of way, you know. So it was completely, in the morning it was the stark reality of these 30 restless kids, and in the afternoon it was just sort of a, you know, everything was blocked out.
I didn't want to drink while with all my responsibilities, because as long as I was there, my children were going to make some demands on me. I had to get out, away from it all, run away, you know. And of course, then you're out of the home quite a bit. And I used to, you know, like we all do, you know, I could always make 1,000 excuses, you know. Well, by God, it just won't hurt him to get supper. And I'd go bowling maybe at 1 o'clock, and here again, you know, I'd have everything arranged. But see, I'd have a few drinks, and then there was no tomorrow. I didn't go home at 4 when the kids come home from school, and I wasn't there for supper. And then, of course, you know, in a home like this, then there's that kind of a Cold War going on all the time, where even if you don't battle in front of the kids, which most people do, this is what I think is so hard. It's a family illness, you know, it's a family disease, because you know you got to talk to your husband when he comes home from work, and you're not always sure, you know, what you did, and you know, that waiting was always real hard for me, you know. I just always wished that I could get it over with and get the recriminations or the snubbing or the just not talking about it or what. Just get it over, because I think not knowing, of course, was worse than really getting through it. I think probably the blackouts and not liking, and then of course we all have a crisis, you know, something really traumatic happens, and with me it was falling down in a bar, and I remembered when I hit that bar and hit my head, I was aware enough at that moment to know you really, you know, you dirty, you know, everybody is looking at you. And I remembered my husband and another man helping me out. And as loaded as I was and not aware, I knew even for that moment. Now, I didn't remember anything from then on, but that was just like a light that went on and off, and it snapped. Like my loss of control was like 4 or 5. My loss of control is I don't give a damn from then on, where I could remember saying with all the sincerity in my heart, and really meant it, you know, I got this to do tomorrow. I got to take the kids to the dentist. I got to do this. I got a full day, and I don't want to feel lousy, and I don't want to be hungover. So I'm going to really be a lady. I'm going to go home when my husband's ready to go home, and I'm going to try to coast about on 3 drinks.
Oh, I think I probably became suspicious about my drinking, probably 10 years ago, 10, maybe more. Because I always wanted to do the things that would include drinking, and I wanted, that was just the kind of thing I enjoyed. And I I know for a while I was quite active in PTA, and I was active. I belonged to 2 bowling teams, and I did a lot of help with the community drives and that sort of thing. But then when my drinking took over, I gradually worked myself out of these, because I a lot of times wouldn't be in shape to go to the PTA meeting or to reside at it, or I couldn't hold a bowling ball, let alone throw it. And you just have to gradually work yourself out of that. And that gave you more time to stay home and drink, too, because you sure couldn't have a bottle of beer at the PTA. And one thing just leads to another. Before you know it, you're depending on drink. It's just everything to you. You'll do anything to get that stock of beer or whatever you happen to be drinking. You become so selfish and wrapped up in what you're doing and how are you going to get your beer, and make sure you have the money stuck away so when you decide to have a drink, there's the money and all you have to do is go get it. I think a housewife has to, more or less hides her drinking problem more than a man. A man is free to go out and into the bars and party and chase women, maybe, whatever they like to do. But a woman will probably stay at home. I know I did. I stayed at home and hid my drinking. I tried to hide it. I'm sure everybody knew about it. But I didn't want to be seen. I was ashamed, of course. And if the doorbell rang, I wouldn't answer it unless I was just caught in a bind and had to answer it. And the same with the phone. I a lot of times wouldn't answer the phone. You get to the place where you lose your self-respect and you just don't have time for anybody. You've closed yourself off so that you really have lost your friends. And I don't know, I guess you just get down to a place where you realize that that there's more to life than what you're having. And I know I was a terrible burden to my husband. He had quite a responsible job to do, and I know he went to work and his mind was here, wondering if I was drinking today or if I was all right or how things were. And he never knew when he came home whether I'd have a dinner ready or whether I'd be in bed, passed out.
Have a cup of coffee.
And I know, I'm sure in my case, it just got to the place where he couldn't take it any longer. It was making a nervous wreck out of him, and I was killing myself slowly.
Back in the beginning of this drinking, I'm sure that I didn't even realize that there was anything wrong. After a year or two of it, maybe go out and go on a party or something with people at work, and everything's fine for 3 or 4 or 5 months, and then pretty soon do it again. Find during these times that generally she would be the last one to want to leave. She was always the last one to leave, and I'd have to pull her home, and there's old Dick, the party pooper, all the time. This begins to bring resentments in, just almost subconsciously. As the thing progresses, as it progressed over the years, it just got worse and worse and worse, and these periods of sobriety narrowed. You get down to maybe 2 months apart, and in the latter stages of this thing, 3 weeks of sobriety got to be a good long time. One of the real sorry features of this thing, as I sit back and think about it, is the complete immature attitude that I had in the thing. Your thinking just becomes so muddled that I just continued to give her good excuses. I'd come home and find her drinking again, and instead of trying to be a little bit understanding like normally you would if you understood this thing as a disease, I just started raising all kinds of Cain. Criticize her bitterly, just raise all kinds of things, find the booze, dump it down the drain. My Lord, I've put many a barrel down the drain, and no question about that. And when you stop...
That made me determined to go out and find some more.
Sure, just give her another excuse. this whole experience, to me, just, I don't know why people of average intelligence don't seek the knowledge of what's going on with alcohol, but you really aren't aware of it. You don't know where to go for help. This whole thing was pretty much culminated several months ago. Marion had been on a 2 or 3 week drunk, and I finally got her sobered up, and 2 nights later, after she was sober, we were over at our daughter's house for dinner, and we were in the basement, and I heard a plunk upstairs, and of course I raced upstairs to see what was wrong, and I found her sitting on the floor, and she'd fallen, was beginning to shake a little bit, and I picked her up to put her on a couch, and she went stiff on me, and her eyes were dilated. She was delirious. She'd gone into DT's. Time I didn't know it.
Wasn't any convulsion.
But I laid her down on the divan, and in pretty much sheer panic, got a hold of my family doctor, and while my daughter was trying to get the doctor on the phone, I was trying to calm her down a little bit, and I thought at first she was having a heart attack. But our son-in-law came up the steps, and she started making remarks about getting him away from me. He's trying to get to me, and it suddenly dawned on me that what was going on. And when after this happened, I just thought, well, I've got to do something about this. So I went off downtown and pretty much blundered into the Siouxland Alcoholic Council and talked to some people down there, and we discussed some possibilities. We kind of took it from there.
Did you ever go out and drink again then?
Yeah, see, I'd promised the kids I'd quit drinking. I'd promised him that I'd only drink just with him. And I couldn't keep my promises. I think that when they say you've hit bottom, I think that was my bottom. I hated to even... I just couldn't stand myself, and my nerves were just...
You were very shaky that day.
For, what, a week. And before, just the next day, I'd keep saying, oh, I wish tomorrow would come. I know I'll feel better. But this time, it just went on and didn't get any better because of what I did.
Was it, can you talk about it? Or was it so bad that... How did it start, Cheryl? It was your birthday.
Yeah. Those...
Probably got your hair fixed.
No.
No?
I looked terrible.
Did you?
And then I looked worse because I wasn't going anywhere. I promised Sonny I'd stay home.
Oh, I see.
And, let's see. Let's see, there was 1, 2, 3, 5 women came. And they all brought beer. And I had went and got 2 6-packs, still thinking that I was just going to stay home, like I promised Sonny. And then the more I drank, the more they'd laugh, the worse I would get.
Oh, you're kind of like I was. The big clown, you mean?
Yeah. And then this friend of mine knew that I didn't get along with this other friend that isn't a friend no more. She knew I didn't get along with her, so she knew that she would be at Jomar's. So that's where she wanted to go, so everybody went there, and she was there.
Is that a tavern? I'm not familiar with it. Must be new.
It's just changed names. I can't remember what.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I must have missed a couple.
I didn't drink there ever before anyway, but...
So So you all went there.
And the more I drank, you know, this mean streak came out. And then I didn't get into the fight with the one that I didn't get along. I got into a fight with a woman that I didn't even know. She came over and called me a hypocrite. And I got to thinking, now she called me a hypocrite. So I went up there and jerked her right off the stool.
Did you?
And I was so drunk, and she was big, you know, and she just wiped up the floor with me.
Well, she really hit you, huh?
Barroom brawl. So, but I don't look too bad after being in a fight.
No, you look better than a lot of my see, Cheryl.
But that,
you were lucky she didn't hurt you.
terrible. That's about as low as I can get.
Do you feel significant? Do you feel important to this? Do you feel important to your family? Do you feel like you're...
I felt like they'd be better off without me. Being the way I am, the way I am.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever think of suicide?
I just felt like I would just leave.
Go away.
Mm-hmm. Just drop out of sight, and then he could marry someone that would be better than me, that would even be better to my kids.
Was it that bad?
Yeah.
Do you think somebody else could be better to them?
Well, when I drink, I mean, no, I'm not any good to him.
Were you mean to him?